Hi, this is I'm on your side, Cora Stack here, Dr. Stack. I want to talk about this paper now because I think it might help people with their understanding of things that are going on at the moment. It's just an educational paper, no names are mentioned, but I've written this after years of researching. So this has taken me maybe 10 years to write. So I mean to kind of research and write and then kind of put it into some kind of structure, to try and hit it from this angle. So understanding personality deformation and stabilisation in severe narcissistic traits. Now, I haven't talked about this much recently, but I think it's important that maybe we bring it up at this stage, just to discuss it to see whether it adds anything to our understanding of some of the complexities that are around in the world at the moment. Stress, defence, targeting, and the limit of treatment. Now, the limit of treatment is a function of the fact that it's only recently been recognised that such treatment exists or is possible. And Harvard have been leading this, as well as other institutes in America. Very few have been leading in this, and particularly the expert who writes it's a brilliant book called The Body Counts the Score, and I'd strongly recommend it. His work, what he's done is superb, really. So in recent years, there has been a growing public awareness of severe psychological bullying. I mean, it's everywhere in the workplace, you'd say, and everywhere else. Coercive control and relationship harm that does not always fit neatly into diagnostic or legal categories. I mean, should it be diagnostic or should it be criminal or illegal? This is the question. I mean, I feel if it's a mental condition or a thinking condition, it should be more, in the mental health area first. So this video explains how certain severe personality patterns can develop, why they become resistant to change, why harm escalates for those targeted, and why recognition matters. So that's important. Recognition matters. But how can you recognize something if you don't understand the patterns? If you don't understand the patterns, how can you recognize something? Especially when treatment does not occur. Well, sure, you're hardly going to offer treatment if you don't recognize the patterns. I mean, it's just one follows the other. So this is not a diagnostic video. It doesn't name individuals. I mean, I wrote it, after maybe 10 years of, incredibly intensive research, listening to all the best psychologists all over the world and trying to integrate it into this. So it's a novel approach to looking at it, really. So it took me years to write it. So it's an educational explaining for survivors, professionals, institutions, and workplaces, grounded in current legal thinking and trauma-informed understanding. So there's pictures here. It's a YouTube, video like everyone else has. So lovely pictures. But I'm not able to I'm not in that league of the experts that have teams behind them. But I have the analysis, the brain power, but not the big team. Until recently, the analytical and the critical thinking skills, that's what will be part of my training. Development and so on. Until recently, severe narcissistic personality pathology was widely considered untreatable. I mean, it goes back to the days of Henry VIII, when he was diagnosed now as a malignant narcissism. They call it it's brutal stuff. And apparently he was a very nice, when he was younger, he was a very nice fellow, but where power went to the head. What it did to him was dreadful. However, Harvard-affiliated clinicians, including teams associated with McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical Schools, and again, the writer of the book, The Body Counts the Score, he's absolutely brilliant, have reported case-based evidence suggesting something more nuanced. Their findings are showing some positive developments that a subset of individuals may show improvement with treatment that they have, very specialized treatment. Change can take a long time. So it's they didn't get to where they are in their thinking, overnight. So the pattern of deterioration in their thinking, or they go from maybe being somewhat rigid to extremely rigid, and they're thinking somewhat black and white, but maybe maybe more moderate to extremely black and white. But it doesn't happen overnight. There's a whole load of factors that influence the change in the thinking, and it's very hard to spot as it's going along. So, and then what happens, the deformation is rigid and it stabilizes. It's like a convergence sequence, in mathematics, and it's incredible when you see it, and most people can't spot it. That's the problem, and they're saying, "Oh, I can't spot it." No, well, that's because of the way targets are selected. So improvement often involves, this is absolutely essential, accountability. So improvement involves accountability, reduce blame, and recognition of others as separate people. This is not a cure, it's a possibility under strict conditions of containment, care, and accountability. Across specialised approaches, including, the kind of approaches, transference-focused psychotherapy, mentalisation-based treatment, and schema-based therapies. But there's more. The recent Harvard, there's a program on treating narcissism, I think, is even better than this. And it's even better than, it has a better design in terms of its treatment program than this. And it emerged from the treatment of narcissism from Harvard in 2004. So the goal is not behavior control, it's structural change. So that's a big ambitious plan by the University of Harvard and the best world experts in this area to try and see can they make a dent in improving prospects for the treatment of this previously considered untreatable condition and related conditions. They usually are comorbid with other conditions. So if we can kind of bring one down the spectrum, so we'll see how hard it is to bring it down the spectrum, given the stability that it attains at a particular point. So this is the why. And then they're saying we'll give the reasons why that stability is emboldened, if you like. So in simple terms, treatment attempts to help the person notice internal distress instead of exporting, and that's called projection. Increased tolerance for shame and uncertainty, that if they could tolerate that, they'd be less inclined to do all this exporting of it, and projection, and reduce blame, punishment, and control. These are the ways they regulate their emotions, by blaming the other person, punishing them severely, and controlling, an obsession with control. Build accountability for impact, not just intention. So that's important, and that would improve the empathy. If they were building, if the treatment enabled them to build accountability for impact, not just intention. The core challenge is interrupting the externalisation reflex. That's the compulsion to project, and replacing it with safer multiple emotional regulation, which urges them to do this projection. So it's impossible to spot. Now, success at the moment is rare because it's very new. So it's like a cancer treatment. I mean, it's not going to solve all cancer overnight, but the fact that it's a huge breakthrough by the University of Harvard. So even in elite specialist settings, at the moment, treatment requires a significant amount of time. It's like cancer. How many years does it take to treat cancer? Dropout rates are high. Many enter under crisis or coercion. But in particular, what's very concerning, power, status, or institutional protection reduce motivation. So what's extremely concerning about this is that power, status, or institutional protection reduce motivation. So while treatment may be theoretical, possible because of these factors, in particular power, status, or institutional protection reduce motivation, treatment may be theoretically possible, but it remains rare in practice because of the conflict of interest involved in power, status, and in particular institutional protection reduce motivation. So let's explain how this personality deformation develops. So what causes a person to go from being relatively normal into this deformed personality? And it's very hard. It's a disorder or a dysfunction. So it's very hard to spot it because it selects particular targets for all of their dysfunction, and other targets are escape. And then people say, well, there's nothing wrong with that person. I never saw anything wrong with them. They can't do it. They never said anything to me. The person said, well, they did all these horrible things to me. And the person says, well, you must be making it up or imagining it. You see? because it's so selective in the way it targets people. So it often develops under chronic, overwhelming stress. So, for example, overwork, for example, too much work responsibilities, too much work pressure, loss of status or financial pressure, family conflict, separation, toxic workplaces. A lot of it is just too much work, overburdened, completely, overburdened with work pressures and unable to deal with the stress of work and the pressures, threats to power or reputation, illness, aging, or dependency, and then family bereavements, anything like that, any major change, divorce or loss of status in particular. Loss of status is a huge part of this. These pressures generate intense internal distress, shame, fear, rage, emptiness. When a person lacks the capacity to process these internally, distress is increasingly outward. That's called projection. So let's see how these individuals over time project that distress outward. So that externalisation is used as emotional regulation. But let's see what these people do. At a certain point, often unconsciously, the person discovers something. Blaming, punishing, or controlling another person reduces their internal distress. So it's used as emotional regulation, and it's incredible, really, when you look at it this way. This is one of the major insights in my paper. Blaming, punishing, or controlling another person reduces their internal stress. That relief then reinforces the behaviour. So the more they blame, the more they punish, the more they control, the more they're able to reduce their internal distress. So that becomes, a reinforcing the relief that they get from blaming, punishing, controlling, or manipulating, subject them to mind games, gaslighting, all that. The relief enforces the behaviour. Over time, externalisation or projection becomes the primary emotional regulation strategy. Distress is no longer processed because it's pushed out and it's externalised, and that becomes the primary emotional regulation strategy. It is exported. Then let's explain why certain people are targeted. This is what's very clever about it. Well, it's if you don't understand it. So targets are not random. They're often people who are emotionally intelligent, emotionally significant, have high empathy or conscience, are structurally vulnerable, see clearly and reflect reality. These individuals act of shame and vulnerability, which are then projected outward. That's part of the externalisation in this condition. Projection, blame shifting, and compulsion. Through projection, internal distress is attributed to the target. The target is experienced as dangerous or immoral. Responsibility is reversed. Oh, it's incredible what this condition does. And most people don't even spot that it's a severe personality dysfunction. It's a severe mental thinking problem, very severe, because externalisation reliably reduces stress, then it becomes compulsive. So it's like an addiction. The cycle resembles addiction. Distress leads to action, leads to relief, leads to repetition. So the action, the reflection decreases, the empathy erodes, and the escalation follows. Then you have what's very concerning here is the deep stabilisation of the defence structure. That's really concerning. Over time, this becomes a stabilised defensive system. Features include chronic externalisation, projection, splitting, omnipotent control, and defensive certainty. From the inside, you see, so this is the externalisation that we talked about. The inside, the state feels calm, certain, and morally justified. This explains why accountability feels like persecution. Selective harm and public charm. They're brilliant at compartmentalisation. So compartmentalisation allows public charm and credibility, private punishment and destabilisation. And see that split? This presentation makes recognition extremely difficult for systems because public charm, credibility, private punishment and destabilisation. Impact on targets. Targets commonly
experience, which is called psychological bullying, it's called projection, externalisation, hypervigilance, confusion and self-doubt, nervous system dysregulation, loss of safety, loss of livelihood, everything like that. Huge loss. So I want to go back now to this. These are adaptive trauma responses, not personal weakness. So there are direct consequences of the actions of this very controlling person, and this person who has a real problem with emotional regulations, and over time develops an addiction to the projection and blames, control, punishes, becomes a way of stabilizing the internal regulation and dysfunction. So prolonged exposure leads to reality erosion, empathy collapse, and moral injury to the person. Why systems fail and why recognition matters. Institutions struggle because cases are complex, chronic, high conflict. Harm is often mislabeled as mutual conflict, say in a high conflict situation. Where treatment does not occur, recognition becomes the primary safeguard. Recognition prevents false expectations of empathy, explains explanation, guides protective action, and validates lived experience. Recognition is not punitive, it is protective. Personality deformation can produce internal stability in one person while generating profound instability and trauma in others, the targets of the deformation. Emerging treatments suggest that change may be possible for a few. We're at the very beginning, and I think the 2024 treating narcissism program from Harvard was mind blowing in terms of its design. Where treatment does not occur, recognition is essential for projection. So the references here that there's references to mentalization-based treatment for personality disorders, Handbook of Dynamic Psychotherapy for higher level personality, narcissistic personality, and narcissistic personality disorder, a clinical perceptive trauma and recovery and coercive control. But there's the I'll just look there at the treating narcissism. So again, this video is only for educational purposes. It does not diagnose individuals or replace professional assessment. Believe me, I've read more than most in this business. I've listened to everything, every different perspective I've listened to. Let me see, can I find that what really was mind blowing in terms of the treating of narcissism. I have mentioned it there. It's a group that's led by a brilliant fellow in the University of Harvard, treating narcissism. I just want to see, is it anywhere here? Yes, it's here. I have it here. So let me watch the one that the therapy, 50% off of the moment. So it's 50% off. So it's by NICABM, the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behaviour Medicine. Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. So it's called Treating Narcissism, How to Dissolve Narcissistic Defences and Foster Client Vulnerability. So what the ad for this here is, treating narcissism can be complex and multifaceted. That's because many of the hallmarks behaviour of narcissism are the very ones that create enormous barriers to change. It's hard to create a therapeutic alliance in the face of defensiveness, denial, and a lack of self-awareness, and it can be uniquely challenging to execute even the gentlest intervention without activating the client's defensiveness. So how can we help clients let go of their grandiose experience and become more willing to work beneath the vulnerability and shame that so often lies beneath? We put this question to 22 of the top world experts in the field to bring you their best strategies for working with narcissism. So they have a course, and the link between trauma, attachment and narcissism. Jana Fisher, PhD, Peter Levin, PhD, Jennifer Sultan, and Ron Signal. I think he's the main guy there from Harvard, Ron Signal, Lyons and Russell Knotts, Ziedel Seagal, and 3 specific ways narcissism can take root in childhood, a 4-step approach to work with narcissism that stems from trauma, 2 distinct strategies to build rapport with clients and narcissistic tendencies, how to revisit past wounds without agitating a client's sense, 1 critical step, and then this is the strategies to manage counter-transference in working with narcissism. And of course, the big guy here, the body writes this guy, he's brilliant. Bessel van der Kolk. Bessel van der Kolk. He's the real big guy here, MD. He's unbelievable. Peter Levine, Chris Irons. You see there's some of the requests here. Zinda Seagal, Shella Harrell, PhD, she's very big. Chris Willard, Christine Badesky, and Ron Siegel. You see how to respond to hurtful comments that activate your threat response. All these people make terrible insulting comments, very hurtful. They're really, they're terrible for mind games and punishment. Oh, they're brutal. There's disproportionality in their punitive ways of dealing with people. Punishment is a huge thing, and that regulates their internal